Good evening and welcome. My name is Esmel Meeks, and I'm a member of the Hampton Roads Black Caucus and CAT Committee. I'm delighted to be here tonight with our special guests and panelists and everyone watching remotely on YouTube or Facebook. Throughout the discussion, we welcome your questions, which can be asked in the comment section at any time during the meeting. Tonight's discussion will be focused on CRP with investigatory and subpoena powers. As an HRBC member, we will not represent nor imply our personal positions on CRP. This is not a discussion on problems in the community that will be addressed in a future discussion. I'm honored to be joined tonight by my fellow CAT committee member and moderator, Conrad. But before we hear from Conrad, Seiko would like to briefly discuss CRP. Seiko?
All right, thank you. And thank you for tuning in on this great discussion. Citizen review panels with investigatory and subpoena powers. I'm Seiko Varner. I'm the chair for the Community Action Team Subcommittee, the Battle Cats of the Hampton Roads Black Committee, the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. And we're going to have a great series of forums in this manner where we get a chance to talk about policies that are impacting our community. Hey, every policy all of our politicians speak about, all the things that they chop up about in the city council meetings, in the school board meetings, in the state meetings, they impact our lives. And it's important that we become more involved in the policies that impact our lives. So I'm going to ask you towards the end to get involved in the policies that impact your lives. We have some great people who are going to speak on it tonight. We even have a nationally renowned person who ran for the Libertarian Party for the 2020 election. Brother Spike Cohen will be here with us as well. So, hey, stay tuned, learn a lot. Make sure you take some great copious notes and be ready to take action after we finish. This is all about taking action.
I'm Conrad Chesman. I'm also a member of the Hampton Roads Black Caucus's Community Action Team. It is at this moment where I would be introducing Mr. Rob Bracknell, currently not here on the feed at the moment. He was going to come on in order to talk about the concept of investigative review panels and civilian review panels, and just give a little bit of a talk on it because he's been a member and a leader of Virginia Beach's investigative review panel. As I don't have him on at the moment, I'll go over the City of Virginia Beach's investigation review panel's policy and procedures. Here is its purpose. It is the purpose of the investigation review panel to ensure that reports and conclusions of the police department's internal affairs office investigations involving abuse of authority or other serious misconduct are complete and accurate and factually supported. To that end, the panel shall have the authority to review these findings to the extent provided for herein when a complaint is dissatisfied in such an investigation put forth. The panel may also make recommendations to the city manager that specific police department policies and procedures be revised. Panel hearings shall not be considered civil or criminal proceedings, but independent reviews of administration investigations concerning the performance of sworn police officers. All panel hearings shall be open to the public, provided, however, that in the discretion of the panel for good cause shown, a hearing may be closed upon the request of the party to protect the privacy of individuals such as juveniles and victims of sexual assault. Also, panel deliberations may be conducted as provided for in subsection IVC to the below, but the panel's decision shall be announced in public once they have concluded their deliberations. That is the purpose of the panel itself. It was created as far back as 1991, and the topic tonight is whether or not that shall be augmented or stay the same.
A Citizens Review Board, also known as a Civilian Review Board, is described by the Free Dictionary as a municipal body composed of citizen representatives charged with the investigation of complaints by members of the public concerning misconduct by police. Citizen review boards generally operate independently of the courts and other law enforcement agencies. Among the first citizen review boards established in the United States were in the cities of Philadelphia and New York. They were established in the late 1950s and 60s. The Philadelphia Board operated intermittently from 1958 to 1967. Their lifespans were short. The New York City Board only survived for 4 months and was abolished by a public vote. Yet, in that period, it received 422 complaints, more than twice the number reported to the Internal Police Revenue Board in a single year. As in Philadelphia, the New York Board was unable to overcome hostility from the union representing rank-and-file police officers. The U.S. Department of Justice conducted a report called Citizens Review of Police. It highlighted 3 assertions of concerns about citizen review boards. 1. Citizens should not interfere in police work. 2. Citizens do not understand police work. And 3. The review process is unfair. After the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, the concepts of citizen review boards were springboarded into the national consciousness. The state of Virginia established a law to require cities and counties across the state to increase the power of citizen review boards to investigate complaints against the police.
Also tonight, I would like to take the moment to introduce Spike Cohen. Spike Cohen, hailing from out of state, he's out of South Carolina. He ran for the vice presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party in 2020. He is also here to share his thoughts on the concept of CRBs, possibly touch on the idea of government accountability along that matter. So we are pleased very much to have him on this Hampton Roads Black Caucus show about the concept of CRBs. So good to see you, Mr. Spike.
Conrad, Esmail, thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with y'all.
Welcome, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
I would like to welcome our other guests. And first, I will start with Mr. Luis Cortez. Luis, please introduce yourself and provide a brief position on your brief position on CRP.
My name is Luis Cortez. Been in Hampton Roads 22 years. Business owner and a former candidate for Virginia Beach School Board. My position of review boards against it due to the fact that a lot of civilians do not have the knowledge about the law, and I believe that that's we're not going to be fair to the police officers right now.
Thank you, Luis, and again, welcome. I would also like to introduce Minister Gary McCullum. Minister McCullum, please introduce yourself and provide a brief position on CRP.
Thanks, Conrad. Thanks, Esmail, for inviting me here. Clearly, we need oversight over our police. This is an issue of trust. This is about providing safety not only for Black and brown communities, but it's also providing safety for our police. Because without this oversight, without reinstilling trust in our police, our very officers, they are in danger. But more importantly, what's in danger is our economy. Because if we don't have oversight over our police, who is going to visit this great resort city, knowing that that we are not open to all citizens and treating all of our citizens fairly? So again, thanks for the invite. Look forward to the discussion tonight.
Minister McCollum, thank you. Mr. Cortez, I would like you to react to the following statement. Police are not the problem. Criminals and the community are the problems.
I mean, I think there's always people, even police, that are not perfect. They're human overall. But you can't judge all law enforcement as bad. I believe there's some great cops out there. Me coming from an inner city, and having a lot of family members and friends are law enforcement, I can tell you that not all of them are bad. I mean, it just, maybe we have to weed them out, see who's who, and during the training process. But I believe that they're people just like you and I, and they have flaws, but we can't judge all of them by one or a few.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez. Minister McCullum, the same statement. What is your reaction? Police are not the problem. Criminals and the community are the problems.
Recently, the police chief in Louisville, Chief Erica Shields, she made the statement to NBC News that policing and racism are connected. And she went on to say that police are not racist, and I completely agree with that. But the system itself is what is the problem. And unless we have oversight over the system, we're not going to really be able to highlight great police officers, the majority of whom are great and are doing their jobs. We're not going to be able to highlight those guys. And I see this as a safety issue. I see it as a safety issue, not only for Black and brown communities, but I see it as a safety issue for police. And I see it as a safety issue for our economy. So yes, your question, no, police are not the problem, but we need to have oversight over our police to make sure that all citizens are treated equally within this system.
I'm going to throw another one at you, Minister McCullum. It's another statement I'd like you to react to. We have heard enough. We have a hard enough time recruiting police as it is. CRPs will lead to resignations.
Not at all. Not at all. The reason that we can't recruit police officers is not the CRP. The reason that we can't recruit police officers is, frankly, we don't pay them enough. And frankly, we have put a system in place where they're over-policing. We're still policing like it's 1952. Why are we not? I spent 26 years in the telecom business. Why are we not using technology? Why are we still having police chase speeding motorcycles? Why are we still having police stop infractions for expired license plates? Those are the kinds of things that we don't need our police doing, but we do it because we're still policing like it's 1952. Let's wake up. This is 2021. Let's get our police out of the business of interacting with citizens where they should not be. Let's get our police involved in those interactions where they have to be involved.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Cortez, what are your thoughts? We have hard enough time recruiting police. CRPs will lead to resignations.
Well, it will lead to resignations. And on top of that, the reason why we're short on law enforcement is several reasons. One is the pay. Two is the respect of authority. When you have young kids in let's say, inner city already saying, dropping the F-bomb on the police, disrespecting, calling them pigs, things of that nature, and at a young age, what that tells about, that they're already growing up with that mentality. So when they get approached by a cop, their mentality is always aggressive towards a PD or anybody in authority, teachers included. So this is a trend. When we're teaching our young kids about disrespecting authority and saying pretty much we don't have to listen to them or respect them, there you go. That's a big problem right there in our youth. It starts from the inner city, from our home. So if we want to talk about respect and how to get more police officers, we need to grow there. We need to start building there. Sometimes it is the same household. Maybe somebody in their household got affected by PD or law enforcement authority that gave them a sour taste in the mouth in their family. So now you got somebody's aunt and uncle talking like this in front of young kids, and then there you go. These kids have that mentality already. Then you got music, you have other influences, and here's the trend. So by the time they become teenagers, there you go. The first time they see a cop or something, first they start going off on them. You can't be aggressive to a cop and expect them to take it lightly, because then now their life is in fear. And this is somebody that's been in Newark, New Jersey, so I know about law enforcement in the inner city.
I have to respond to that. I have to respond because here we are, and Louis, I respect you, bro, but listen, here we are. We're expecting a young 21-year-old to be disciplined, but yet we're saying that the police officer who's trained, been through the academy, they're not disciplined. That doesn't make sense to me. And so my point is that I made earlier, let's get our police, let's reimagine policing. Let's get our police doing the things that they should be doing. And if they're only doing those things, guess what else they will be freed up to do? They will be freed up to go into the communities and build relationships. That's what's not happening today. If we would get them out of the business of traffic stops and all the things that we're doing and chasing motorcycles and standing on the side of Great Neck Road and catching people on Shore Drive speeding, get them out of that business and get them into the business of building relationships in our community, then it will solve the issue that you're talking about. But to sit here and tell me that you expect the young 21-year-old to behave with discipline, but yet the police officer is going to be afraid, that doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Cortez, America, our criminal justice system, and police forces are not systematically racist. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Yeah, I think with cases, studying the cases, I think there's room for improvement. I do believe that there's room for improvement. There's room for a lot of the changes that can happen in our judicial system. I do believe that. I think it's not fair. I can say that, but is there, and we have to elect people that think the way we feel, and stop just going with just name personnel. Let's elect people that actually have that new mentality, that new way of thinking, and stop going with the same people over and over again and getting elected just because of name recognition. Give some of these new folks a chance to make a change, because you'd be surprised what a lot of new-minded people trying to run for a seat could actually put in place.
Minister, does systematic racism exist in America, our criminal justice system, and our police force?
Absolutely. And it's laughable to think that it doesn't. Anyone who thinks that it doesn't is just living in la la land. It does. I mean, just look at who's in our prisons. Just go visit a prison and see who's there. It's black and brown people, black and brown poor people. Because even if you're black and brown and you're rich, you're not going to be there. So it's economic, but it's also racist in its nature. That's the way it is. It's not by accident that even in my own neighborhood in Virginia Beach, that when I first moved here, I was pulled over more than once. Now that they know who I am, I'm not getting pulled over, but that's the system. That's the system itself is racist. The system itself, our justice system, it preys on people who are poor, black, and brown. And that's why when you go to any jail or penitentiary around this state or around this country, you'll see who is incarcerated.
Luis, you fit that description. You are brown. Have you experienced systematic racism as a brown man in America?
No. I can't say I have. I can't say that the times I've been pulled over by the police, it wasn't something I did wrong, or that I didn't know it was wrong, or maybe like the minister was saying, tail light, or something like that, because back then tail lights, we get pulled over for a tail light. But I never got discriminated against because of my color. Not in my 40 years of living.
So can I ask you a question?
Okay.
So have you ever wondered, I'm assuming that you own a home.
Yes.
Have you ever looked into how you're taxed? The valuation on your home?
Same, yeah, it should be the same.
Have you looked at the history of redlining in our country? Have you looked at wealth generation in our country and why today, let's not talk about incomes, but let's just talk about wealth. And let's talk about how in the 50s and 60s and in the 40s, laws were passed and our government sanctioned creating wealth building opportunities for people that did not look like you. And today, those same homes that were sanctioned and that were sponsored and that were supported financially, those homes are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and have created wealth in communities that don't look like you. That's systemic racism. And we wonder why we have income and wealth gaps in our country today. and to have someone believe that there is not systemic racism in our country, you just haven't done the reading. I've done the reading. I grew up in a housing project in Richmond, Virginia. I've done very well financially, but I've never forgotten where I came from. And I understand how poor Black and brown people were warehoused in projects. And those effects the effects of those decisions that were made generations ago, we're still feeling the impact of that today.
Okay. Can I respond to that? So just like you and I, we both come from inner city, from housing projects. What decisions did we make to get out of it and make a change? Overcoming many of obstacles. So here's an issue that I have. Why are the people that are in there now believe there's no way out? If you and I could do it in different time frame, why can't they?
Because that's a great question. Can I give you the answer? And I'm gonna give you the answer by asking you a question. Who was the first Negro to integrate Major League Baseball?
The first one was Jackie.
The first Black American Negro to integrate baseball.
I guess Robinson, Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson. And let me tell you that question that I gave you was a trick question, because the real question that should be asked is not who was the first Negro to integrate Major League Baseball. The real question that should be asked was who was the first Negro that white Major League Baseball owners allowed to get into baseball. In other words, I was allowed to be successful, and so were you. But so many other of my brothers and sisters were not allowed, and they were tripped up because of all the obstacles that they faced with policing, with the criminal justice system, with our education system. That's what happened. And you were an exception, and you didn't do it by yourself. You did it because somebody wanted to demonstrate that, no, if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it proves that the American dream is true for everybody. And I don't believe that lie.
Gentlemen, I want to just briefly cut in here to try to aim it back more toward CRBs, and perhaps one day very soon we'll have a nice show just about the concept of structural society, if you will. But CRBs, we're going to try and get back on to that topic here. I'm going to speak a little bit on a recent event with the 200 plus men, and that we had a couple of local police leaders who took part in it about this topic as well. And I believe they are, where's the link here?
In regards, it's what the community wants. It's, we are part of the community, but I can give you some past experience from having a citizen review board in Cincinnati with independent investigations, subpoena power, many of the things that are being talked about right now. In regards to a true board, I think we have to remember that if we want true independent investigations, that is just not a community board. You have to hire trained individuals that are familiar with administrative law, rule of law, how to do administrative investigations, if it's going to hold standing in the community and appear fair to our officers when they're being investigated. So there is a significant cost to standing up a panel the way that it's being discussed. I can just tell you from experience from 2003 forward with the Cincinnati CCA model, I don't know that it ever used its investigative subpoena power. We have the authority to compel our officers to comply with an investigation. So, and we also found that 98% of the time, what internal would recommend and find in their investigations, that same finding was mirrored by the CCA. So just some experience with that model, I think, if that's what the community decides for us, we can make that happen. But I just want to put out there that it's more than just a community board. We have to have dedicated individuals, and there is a dedicated cost to us putting this in place. But it also does give the community, that understanding that the police are just not holding themselves accountable, that there is an independent body reviewing what we are doing and making sure that we're doing things for the right reason. And if that's what they decide for in Virginia Beach, we can make it happen. We're going to let the community dictate that for us.
I believe you're on mute, Conrad.
I hate it when that happens. We're going to bring on Mr. Spike Cohen here to provide more of a national voice on the concept of policing in general, and sort of have a lively discussion with the three gentlemen guests here regarding that. So let's sort of attack the comments we just heard from Virginia Beach Police Chief Newdigate. Mr. Spike, let's lead off with yourself about your initial thoughts on his comments right there.
Yeah, attack is the right word. So here is why Internal Affairs and I guess it was called the CCA in Cincinnati, why they lined up so much. It was because the police trained them first. So when he mentioned the training of the independent review board to make sure that they understood the law, this is them now receiving the exact same training that police are getting and that Internal Affairs are getting. In order for a CRB to be taken seriously in the first place and actually be independent, it has to actually be independent. It does not require a massive understanding of criminal law to be able to know whether or not someone should have been attacked or violence used against them or shot or tased or tear gassed or something like that. That doesn't require a intimate understanding of anything. It's interesting that now that we're talking about citizen review boards, that police departments suddenly want to talk about more training in how the law works when the average police officer only gets a few weeks of training to begin with when it comes to the law. They don't need it to enforce it, but for someone to look over their shoulder and make sure they're not abusing anyone, suddenly they need all this training. They need to be truly, truly independent. And a part of that means they also shouldn't be able to receive the same type of funding and lobbying efforts for when they're running for these offices for citizen review board if they're not being appointed that the politicians can. Because the second that the police lobbies, the second that the police unions, the second that the ancillary cottage industry built around over policing are involved in the lobbying of who's in the citizen review board, then they're just as corrupted as the politicians and the police are in that situation. So they need to be truly independent. Another aspect of it is they have to have actual power. They need to have not just the ability to subpoena people, not just the ability to investigate things, but they need the ability directly to refer things directly to the attorney general, and they need to have people in positions of influence and power within the prosecutorial offices. This needs to be a body that is able to look at the people who have been given a badge and a gun and minimal training and told that they are going to enforce all of the laws on the U.S. code and state code of laws against all of the people. They need to be able to have that ability to be able to look over them. And then the final thing is, this can't be in a vacuum. If we have a citizen review board, but yet we still have qualified immunity, then there's going to be problems, because even if the citizen review board finds that the police officer did something wrong, then if they can still go into court and go, well, your honor, I was just doing my job, they still get off. We need to end qualified immunity. We need to be looking at the laws that they're enforcing in the first place. We heard earlier about why people aren't signing up. The biggest thing I heard traveling across the country last year, both from people that used to be officers, people that considered becoming officers when they got out of the military, and people who were currently officers, was that when they looked into it, they suddenly found out they weren't doing what they thought they were going to be doing. They weren't actually protecting the community. They were mostly enforcing traffic stuff and ruining people financially for weeks with $200 and $300 fines over victimless crimes that could have just as easily been solved by simply handing someone a sheet of paper and saying you have 30 days to work this out, and that way you don't get fined. Or better yet, letting that be done by a camera and something sent to them in the mail. They're enforcing victimless crime laws, the war on drugs, the war on guns, disproportionately enforcing them in poorer communities, which typically in many cases are also communities of color. And they were in general doing a bunch of things that they did not think that they were supposed to be doing. They didn't know that's what they were signing up for. And yes, there's a lot of disrespect that comes with that. Now, Minister, I want to apologize ahead of time. Yes, people often say F the police. You'll notice they don't say F the fire department. They don't say F the paramedics. They don't say F the librarian. They don't say, F the person that's keeping the grounds at the park. They're focusing on the police. Why? Because the police often are not there by the actual system that is built. They are not there to protect or serve. And in fact, there's actual Supreme Court decisions saying that the police are not under any legal obligation to protect or serve the people, even though that's what it says on the side of their car. Their job largely is to enforce laws, including the vast majority of which are victimless crimes, things that no one should be going to jail for. So we need to look at getting rid of those types of laws, or at least greatly reforming them. We need to look at decriminalization. We need to look at ending cash bail. We need to look at ending civil asset forfeiture. We need to look at ending the 1033 military surplus program. We need to look at ending a series of things that leads to the police looking less and less like Mayberry RFD and looking more and more like G.I. Joe. Speaking of G.I. Joe, we just saw in your area, Lieutenant Nazario. Here is a man who was in the Army, who was being very respectful, who was operating well within his rights, and was simply asking, why did you pull me over? Which he has a legal right to do. The disrespect there was coming from the two officers who pulled the man over because they initially couldn't see his license plate because it was a temporary. Once they pulled him over, they saw it, problem solved. Instead, they pulled out their guns, they harassed him, they threatened him, they pepper sprayed him, they put him on the ground, and then they threatened him some more. A system that allows this to happen and allows officers to believe that they should be able to do this leads to those bad apples we hear about ruining the entire bunch. And the problem is, it's not just the apples, it's the barrel that they're in. So we need to look systemically at the entire thing. This is a holistic problem. A CRB can be a part of it, as long as it's independent and has actual powers to enforce, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, and on its own, it's not going to fix the problem.
Very strong words and opinions, and thank you for sharing that, Mr. Cohen. I want to go to the counterpoint here. Mr. Lewis, your thoughts regarding those words, and also Chief Newdigate's, and your opinion on the matter.
Well, as far as obtaining any information you want, it's something called the FOIA request, which a lot of civilians probably don't even know about it. And if you want to get anything done, there's also a written mandamus, which not the regular civilian will not know about these things if they don't study and research about it. So these are things that educate ourselves or the community about their powers of doing it themselves. There's no need for a board. Like you said, the board's going to be chosen by people in power. So it's not going to be, regardless of the fact, nobody's probably going to agree with them 100%. Whether they get elected, whether they get chosen, there's not going to be 100% to please everyone. So as civilians, we have powers as civilians to go ahead and do that. There is no need to waste money on another board or getting anybody else on it. I agree with getting more technology. We have to come with new terminal. I'm an IT guy, so technology is a key. Those cameras should be on immediately. I believe having cameras on all the time, except on break or when you call to get off duty for a break or whatever. But I do believe having cameras, and just like I said, proactive, not reactive. I do think, if we can educate our communities, we'll be able to do it ourselves, and know what our law protects us. But our communities do not know it, and that's an issue. If we could educate and probably do something to for informational.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Cortez. We do want to hear from Minister McCollum, but before we hear from Minister McCollum, I want to let the audience know that we're going to move over to questions. So we welcome you to ask questions in the comments, either on YouTube or Facebook. Feel free to ask any question as it relates to CRB. Conrad?
Thank you again, Mr. Cortez, for your solid points there as well. And I want to pass it over to Minister Gary McCollum, and just your response to what you both heard from the two gentlemen here, as well as Chief Newdigate.
Yeah, first off, Spike, Mr. Cohen, thank you for your comments. I completely agree with what you said. We have an issue. To what Chief Newdigate said, I guess my having, these qualifications needed to be on such a board, to me, is ridiculous. And let me tell you why. if that were the case, why do we have juries? Juries are citizens. Juries go into courtrooms and they decide life and death issues. They don't have police experience. And frankly, that's the benefit, that they don't have those experiences. So what he said, I get it, but all you're doing is gaming the system. What we need is oversight. We need people who are going to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And so again, Spike, Mr. Cohen, sorry, I agree with everything that you said. We have a significant problem, and I need to make one correction. There was an early video that said that the General Assembly in Virginia mandated that we have CRBs. Let's be clear, they did not mandate it. It came out of the House of Delegates as a mandate, but once it went into the Senate, it was watered down and it became optional. And that's what was passed and signed into law. And so Virginia Beach and Richmond and Henrico and Norfolk and all the cities and counties around the state, around the Commonwealth of Virginia, they have an option. And what you're seeing right here in Virginia Beach is a slow roll to kill any effort to have a citizens review board. This task force they've created, which was in the paper today. Come on, man. I wasn't born. I may have been born at night, but not last night. That task force that they created, look at the makeup of it. It's all police. It's all former chiefs. It's all people who are going to kill this effort. And so my position is, let's go back to the state. Let's go back to, people running for governor, and let's go back to the House and Senate and say, let's make it mandatory. You got it half right last time, but let's make it mandatory to make sure that we provide oversight to protect citizens, to protect our police, and to protect our economy.
Thank you, Minister McCollum. The point on juries, I think that was a great example. At the same event, Norfolk Chief of Police Larry Boone also spoke. We're going to hear from him now.
Well, with respect to CRBs, I agree we have to be accountable, transparent, and intentional. The challenge is there are 18,000 police departments in the country. And thus far, only about 180, give or take, have CRBs. The other piece of that is, historically, CRBs, if there isn't any influence by the chief of police, tend to be more lenient. I don't have a problem firing someone that should be fired during the holidays. The data shows that when CRBs are led by civilians, they tend to be a little more lenient. My position is we should have them, but the final outcome with respect to discipline recommendations should be held by the chief of police.
I would like to circle back around from Minister McCollum, then to Luis, then finish with Mr. Spike on the comments that we just heard from Chief Boone. What would be your opinion, Minister McCollum?
This issue of discipline, what should happen? I mean, we've made recommendations to this city here in Virginia Beach that if the evidence shows that this person, this police officer did the wrong thing, they should be fired. That should be exactly what should happen. And the problem you have is it's not nepotism, but there's a lot of, that thin blue line, if you will. There's a lot of difficulty in disciplining one of your own, because then you're admitting that you did something wrong. There was something wrong in the training. There was something. That's the problem with that. And so I think that not only should the person, the CRB, have the ability to recommend that this person be fired, but it needs to go a step further. What we have is officers who perform badly, bad officers who get fired, and then they wind up going over to the next city over and they get hired there. That is a real problem. And what Spike brought up is, without qualified immunity, where the officer themselves, he or she, is actually liable and could face repercussions for their behavior, then we have nothing. And so you have to have the whole package. No other organization. I'm a former Army Ranger, former special ops officer. No organization I can think of. Corporations have boards. Our military is controlled by a civilian, the commander in chief, which is a civilian, the president. Everybody has oversight, with the exception of our local police departments. There's something wrong with that.
I would like to now pass it over to Mr. Cortez about your opinion about more civilian involvement regarding these organizations.
Like I said, if a cop does something wrong, I mean, like Chief Boom was saying, if they do something wrong, yes, they should be fired if something done wrong. I don't think they should be, have any immunity if that's the case. But if they did not do anything wrong, then of course they should be, nothing should happen. But it all depends on the case by case scenario, is my opinion.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And now over to Mr. Cohen. Your opinion on what Chief Boom just said.
I am trying to picture the poker face that Chief Boom must have to be able to say on a camera, the problem is I'm worried that these folks are just going to be too darn lenient. I want to be able to really get in there and fire these bad cops. And boy, howdy, am I scared that these folks are going to make it harder for me to do that. The fact that that's a talking point they're using shows just how in a corner they are with this. Let's look at why this is even happening. And yes, qualified immunity is a huge part of it because it creates a cost-benefit analysis that police departments have to make when they have those bad apples. The fact that it's going to cost them a fortune, even if they don't want to protect them with the thin blue line, it's going to cost them a fortune to fight the police unions and to fight the attorneys to get rid of the officer. But if they keep them on the force, it doesn't really cost them anything because they can't be sued and the officer can't be sued. And maybe there's a settlement that the taxpayer has to pay for, but it's not going to come back on them. So we'll just keep them on the force and eventually they'll murder someone and then we can kick them off. That's the kind of cost benefit analysis that's being made over and over and over again. And it contributes to the kind of unaccountability that pushes out good officers that don't want to be this way. So again, I don't even have a problem with there necessarily being like a retired officer on the CRB to give that kind of feedback on specific things where there may be a gray area or something like that. This needs to be made up of people who do understand the law, but also have no connections to the police industrial complex in this country. And it is a complex. I mean, if you look at everything that's the cottage industries that are built around this, with the prison industry, with the police contracting industry, with the bail bondsmen and the cash bail industry and everything that's built around it, there's a huge industry there. Anyone in the CRB needs to be independent of that. And I think possibly the best way to do that is to have direct elections. At the very least, there needs to be some strict guidelines on who's being put on there. The problem is the strict guidelines that are being imposed right now are being imposed by the very people who are trying to game the system. And again, the fact that he literally sat there straight-faced and went, I'm just worried these folks are going to be too lenient. I'm just worried I'm not going to be able to really just do what needs to be done. If that were the issue, this wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't even be talking about this. It is insane. One more thing on this, and it speaks to Minister McCollum. And by the way, you can call me Spike. You don't have to call me Mr. Cohen's my dad. But part of the problem with them being able to jump from police department to police department, you can solve that by requiring, and this can be done, statewide and with, many states participating, require that they have their own liability insurance, and not liability insurance that's paid by the taxpayer. It's paid directly out of their pocket. Assigned to them is not a government-run insurance program. It is a privately run one that can either fail if its formulary is too loose or do well. What that does is this: not only are they having to pay out of pocket so that if there's a payout, it's not the taxpayer paying for it, it's them paying for it. But also, if they can't get coverage because they keep screwing up or they keep intentionally doing something wrong, qualified immunity or no, they can't get coverage, which means they can't ever serve again. That's a very powerful way to stop this as well. There are many things we need to look at to deal with the fact that it's not coincidental that so much of the ire is focused on the politicians that put this stuff out, but also on the police who enforce it. Again, we're not mad at people for putting out fires. We're not mad at people for, being librarians at a library. We're not mad at paramedics. We're mad at a system that over-criminalizes people, especially poor people, and especially poor people of color, and treats them as criminals. And we can look, I know we're not so supposed to talk about systemic racism, but, the coincidence of who was being targeted pre-Reconstruction and who's being targeted now, it's awful fishy who's being targeted there. So, I think that it is, again, I'm actually, I have to clap. I'm impressed with the poker face when he said that. That was actually pretty impressive.
All right, what we're going to do now is move over to viewer questions. And man, I thank you viewers for tuning in tonight to the HRBC's panel forum, if you will, on the civilian review boards. And remember, we would like you guys to not only click and like this page, but also to look into joining the organization and helping out this community with the HRBC. Here's the question from Mary Addison. What is the difference between investigatory power and subpoena power? And I would like to begin this time with Mr. Cortez. Lead off with your opinion on the difference between investigatory power and subpoena power. I believe you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. See, I'm in the industry of, I'm a private investigator in Virginia. So for me, I already have I can investigate. But I think civilians do have the capabilities to obtain certain information if requested accordingly. Subpoena powers, okay, if you have a right case, you could pretty much take out a warrant and just take it to court. And then they'll subpoena them to go to court. If you have enough evidence to charge somebody with something right now in Virginia, anybody can say that they did something and accuse somebody, and they get locked up without no evidence. With just their accusation alone, go down to subpoena to the magistrate and go in there, and then they just take out a warrant. If your story is believable, it is in the Commonwealth. So that's pretty much what I see it,
Thank you. On to Mr. Spike. Your opinion on investigatory and subpoena powers.
So broadly speaking, investigatory power typically means that you don't have to request something, you make the order to get that information. So instead of having to go through the FOIA request, which anyone who's gone through that at any level of government knows what the kind of roadblocks you can get, being told that something doesn't exist, being told that you didn't fill out a form correctly, just being put on indefinite hold forever and things like that. Investigatory power is, no, we need this information. They are compelled to give it to you. Subpoena power is the power to compel people to actually come in front of you and testify. So instead of simply saying, hey, we'd like you to come, would you mind coming? And they go, nah, I don't want to come. If you subpoenaed them, they're actually compelled to be able to come. So that's what that is. And CRBs need both of those things. They need to be able to get information without going through, a typical civilian process of requesting information and hoping that they get it. And they also need to be able to compel people, including officers, including investigators, including potentially prosecutors, anyone that potentially could be involved in explaining whether an abuse happened or whether a misuse happened, because I'd like to see CRBs applied to prosecutors as well as to police. I mean, we often focus on the police because they're the ones that are out there on the streets, but they're often, working in direct they are working in direct conjunction with what's being filtered down to them from the Justice Department. So, I do think that that they need to have both of those things, but that's the general delineation between investigative power and subpoena power, and they need both of it. Esmail, you're muted.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to the next question from Kelvin Wright, and this is for Minister McCollum. Do you think there are some police chiefs that are providing exceptional oversight of their agencies, which is one of their duties?
Well, again, I don't know if a police chief can do this alone. I think it's going to require, again, citizens being totally engaged. And I want to go back to that last question. Yes, you can investigate, but without subpoena powers, you really can't deal with a system that is not necessarily going to cooperate with you. And again, I think, we say the words that this is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. These folks all work for us. Let me just say that one more time. These folks all work for us. We pay them with our tax dollars, but yet somehow we can't hold them accountable. That's what we're talking about here. And so this whole issue of a again, a police chief may want to do the right thing. Well, then show us that you're doing the right thing by having oversight, to include investigatory powers. And if I can't investigate, if someone in the government is stonewalling us and not providing evidence, then I have the right to go to a circuit court and get a subpoena to force you to come and tell the truth. That's what we're talking about. And here's the thing. If you have nothing to hide, what's the problem?
Mr. Cortez, how do you respond to that question from Mr. Wright?
I think the chiefs, that's why they have internal affairs. I mean, honestly, that's why internal affairs are in place to provide that over, being the watchdog of the police. That the DOJ gets involved if they find anything misconduct, or if you take anything, if internal affairs is failing to do their job, then you could make a complaint to DOJ and try to see if they can get involved and see what they're doing, if they're doing anything wrong. Honestly, that's why the internal affairs is there.
I want to take the next question from viewer Michelle. If not through a CRP, how can we guarantee the kind of transparency and accountability that is necessary to rebuild the trust that the community has lost? Let's start with the minister.
Well, I'm going to be perfectly clear that this train has left the station. We're going to get accountability. That's just the way it's going to be. This is not 1952. This is 2021. And the folks that I talk to, the young people, and I'm going to be real with you guys about a situation that took place in Virginia Beach with the killing of Donovan Lynch, who was a good kid, owned 3 LLCs, and was murdered in Virginia Beach a few weeks back. And these kids are saying, if this can happen to Donovan Lynch, who was a good kid, this can happen to anybody. So my point is that you're going to get the oversight one way or the other. Even if the city decides to slow walk and try to kill this effort that's underway right now, creating this task force and stacking it with all of these, pro-police people who are going to come back and recommend that we do nothing, which is probably what's going to happen. And that's why the 3 council people, Aaron Rouse, Sabrina Wooten, and Guy Tower, voted against it. It's still going to happen. It's going to happen even if citizens have to create their own. Because, again, we live in a world where technology is such that those videos, those things that are happening in our community, it can go viral overnight. That kid who was arrested or tried to be arrested illegally at Lynn Haven Mall a few months back, that, Sean King and that went viral immediately. That's the world we live in today. And a lot of these folks, unfortunately, on council and in our governments don't understand the world that we live in today. Accountability and transparency is going to come whether you like it or not.
I would like to throw it to you, Mr. Luis, because you are taking the counterpoint regarding these powers. So how would we get accountability without a CRP? I think you cut yourself off the muting.
Sorry about that. Instead of accountability, cameras. That's what they have body cameras for. They should stay on. I mean, there's no reason why they're outdated models or whatever. When it is 2021, these cameras can be paused or started if you're going on break. But I think they need to be on at all times, even when you're responding to a call. Even if you're in a vehicle responding to a call, I do think they should stay on until everything is done. Or you go on break. It's the only time you shut off your camera, and that way, and make it available if somebody wants it. Just make it available without being redacted or edited.
All right. On the spike gun, is it possible to have accountability without a CRP?
I'm going to go full libertarian on this and say that the problem is how the governing structure is set up. When you have police departments that are dictated by the state and are largely being ruled by federal regulations and programs and the diktat that's trickled down to the states, you essentially have a federalized police. You have police that are participating in federal militarization programs, enforcing the federal war on drugs, enforcing the federal war on guns, and that are participating in the federal civil asset forfeiture program. The more removed from the people the power is, the less accountability to the people we're going to have, the people that are enforcing it. So I think we need to be looking at the idea of community policing. We need to be looking at the idea of taking the first response and law enforcement completely out of the hands of not just the federal government, but state governments as well, and have it where that police department is entirely a body of that city, of that county, of that community, where the people that are directly there have a direct stake and decision in what their first response looks like, in what their policing looks like, in what their requirements are, what their standards are. You're going to find that when it's the people that are directly deciding this, instead of politicians and bureaucrats and crony billionaires deciding it, you're going to find that there's going to be a lot more equity in how the policing is even happening. And you're going to find that we're going to stop sending hammers to deal with things that aren't nails. There are so many times that we are sending people whose primary job is to enforce the law, often using whatever level of force is necessary, to deal with mental health crises, to deal with health issues, to deal with people that are having an actual health crisis, and a social worker or someone who wouldn't cost nearly as much for the fiscal conservatives out there, and who are actually trained in dealing with that situation and de-escalating it so everyone can get home safe to their families, as we often hear from people that are in police departments, can actually deal with that situation. I do think body cams are good, Louise. I like that we have body cams without accountability, by ending qualified immunity, without accountability, by putting the power back in the hands of the people, without accountability through CRBs and other third-party groups, without that level of accountability, even though it does give us more information for the people to see. I can look right now at YouTube videos of cops straight up murdering people, and then the accompanying video of the police department and police union getting together and explaining why that was perfectly normal and fine. And because there's no accountability in place, nothing happened. The final thing is, we talk about training, and I do think there are times that de-escalation training could go in. I think we also need to look at the fact that so much continuing education that's required by police officers, there's no regulation on what that training looks like. So there are entire training courses that are built on teaching officers how to use force and get in as little trouble as possible for it. That's a whole cottage industry that people aren't even largely talking about. But all of that, they have this warrior police training and things like that. We need to get rid of all of that kind of stuff. But we also need to look at the fact that when these types of things happen, there's no level of accountability happening there. Training is not the problem. I don't need training to know not to murder someone. I don't need training to know not to lie to someone and say that the drug dogs picked up something, so I got to rip their car apart and look for more evidence and then tase them if they don't comply. No one needs training to do that. And I guess the final thing I want to address this idea of, well, we don't know what it's like to be a cop. I don't know what it's like to be a logger either. I don't know what it's like to be a delivery driver. I don't know what it's like to be a lot of different things. But if I see any of those people and in the duty of of carrying out the course of their jobs, I find them beating up someone or shooting or tasing them, I think that I'm qualified to say that maybe they shouldn't be doing that.
We're going to get ready to close out, but before we do, we're going to have one last viewer question from Frederick Ford. Should CRPs also be examining the process and methods for hiring and assessment, especially psychosocial, of officers? Bad apples can be screened out. Let's start from the most recent. Back to Mr. Spike.
I don't see why not. I think it's certainly something to look at. I think these types of decisions, it is usually best for Well, it depends. If we're talking about actually changing laws, it's usually best handled through the actual assembly or legislature that would do that, to have the lawmakers do that. But they can certainly make recommendations. And if this is something where the process is internal with the police departments, I think this is potentially a power. It's actually a great idea, Mr. Ford, to be able to have that, to have where they can examine it and make a compelling recommendation, meaning a recommendation that they have to either take on or provide an actual rationale and basis for why they didn't take that on. There's many things we need to look out here. It is going to be impossible to root out all bad apples. Even if we get rid of the problems with the barrel, then there's still going to be some that come through, which is why that accountability absolutely has to be there. But yeah, I don't see why not. They can't look at how to maybe tweak the barrel so there aren't so many bad ones coming through.
I want to move on to Mr. Luis. Because we're thinking about the creation of CRPs, should they also be examining the process and methods for hiring and assessment of officers because of bad apples?
No. The reason is a candidate that goes to the academy, they have a psychiatrist, psychologist. They go through that process with the doctor to see where their state of mind is before they even go through the whole process. If they find that a candidate is not mentally stable, they'll disqualify them due to medical reasons. And they just leave it like that. They just disqualify for medical reasons. But I think that process is already there. It just, maybe they need to go more in depth into that process, and not, the questioning has to be more in depth to see the actual true mind of a person, instead of maybe what the standard is now, just to weed out a little bit of the bad apples.
Minister McCollum, your opinion on hiring and assessment via CRPs?
Yeah, I think clearly that CRP should not just simply be looking at a reactive approach to reimagining our police, not just looking at the incident after it happened and finding out what happened and how do we prevent it. I think they need to be on the front end. They need to be proactive. And I think part of that is looking at everything, not just hiring and assessment, but also how do we train? How do we promote? How do we review? Just because I can drive a vehicle fast and I can shoot a weapon, that's not the only requirement for maintaining your certification and your presence on the police force. I think there are other requirements that the CRP should be looking at. And so again, I think the CRP should be this body that helps the chief and his leadership reimagining what policing should look like. Because I don't think that leaving it to the police chief and his leadership team that they're going to be able to do this alone.
Thank you all. We are getting close to the time to end. But before we do so, I want to thank our special guests for being with us tonight and for the value that you brought to this discussion in educating our broader community. And I want to invite the community to join our organization, the Hampton Roads Black Caucus, and our CAT committee. And if you're interested in joining, I ask that you reach out to us on Facebook, facebook.com/HR Black Caucus. I'd like to allow each of our panelists to provide closing statements. And I'd first like to move to Minister McCollum. Mr. McCollum.
Well, thank you, Conrad, Ishmael, Seiko. Thank you guys for putting this forum on. I want to be perfectly clear. We have a problem, and this problem is not going to go away. It's only going to get worse if we don't address it. Putting our heads in the sand, it won't cut it. This is not, as I said earlier, 1952. This is 2021, and young people, brown, black, poor folks are not accepting the status quo. And so for any city, Virginia Beach or any city around the country who thinks that this is just simply going to go away and blow over, you're going to see this is not the place to be. We need safety for our citizens. We need safety for our police officers, and we need safety for our economies. And if we don't put oversight in place and reimagine the way we police to do it differently, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And so again, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We can do this. We have to do it. I hope we will.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll move to spend Mr. Cohen. I know that's your father, but I want to show some respect to you. Please give us your closing statement.
So I think the way that the Libertarian Party thinks about things in general is we believe that people do best when they are most free. And we believe that often the problems that we are facing in anything, including this subject, are what happens when too much power is put in the hands of too few people. There's unaccountability. There are these top-down solutions that don't work for the people that are the most acutely affected by them because they don't have an actual stake or say in them. There is the crony class that shows up to reap the whirlwind of money and getting involved in it. There's the bureaucrat class that grows in administering it. And who is left behind are the people who are the victims of these bad policies. We see it in healthcare. We see it in education. We certainly see it in policing and in law enforcement and in the prison system and in how all those things work together. Without getting into a whole discussion about, looking at the systemic route that leads to a people who are the descendants of people that were brought here, robbed of their labor for multiple generations, then the target of overcriminalization to keep them in the new slavery system that was run by the prison department, thanks to the 13th Amendment, later shoved into housing projects and ghettos during World War II to take part in the war effort, where their properties were seized in the sharecropping communities that they left in the housing projects post-war, while white families were sent into subsidized suburbs to buy homes for 10% of their value and have the other 90% in instant equity. When you look at this system, that leads to a people who are targeted, over-criminalized, and are often the people getting the short end of the stick, especially when it comes to law enforcement issues. The reality is, when we fix this problem, it fixes it for everyone. And yes, it disproportionately helps those who are being disproportionately the most harmed by it, but it fixes it for everyone. So whatever level, even if you're only being inconvenienced by the system, that inconvenience is gone. So there is not a single person other than the super ultra elites in this system who don't have a vested interest in fixing this. And the last thing I want to close on, and this is going to be somewhat inflammatory, but I'd like to remind everyone that this country was founded on a violent revolution over a proposed 3% tax on tea. We have demonstrated that we are a people who, when not given an opportunity to make our grievance and have it heard, that things can often go poorly and the people who are in charge can be replaced in a myriad of different ways. I don't want it to get to that. I don't think anyone here wants it to get to that. We are seeing the beginnings of it getting to that. And we can get upset about that. We can get upset about the fact that it's happening, or we can look at why it's happening and fix it so that it stops happening. Because I don't live in a lot of these communities that are affected by it. If I did, I'd be even more concerned. But even just witnessing it, I'm angry. Even just being adjacent to it, I'm angry. I can't imagine what it's like to live there. I can't imagine what it's like to say, I'm not burning down my own community. This isn't my community. I don't own it, or at least I don't have a deed to it. We need to look at why this is happening. We need to fix it, and so that we can avoid that. And it's not a threat. It's a simple human reality that when people are desperate, they will act in desperation. Let's end that. Let's end all of these things. Let's set the people free. Let's take all the power and the freedom and the money that's been robbed from us and put it back in the hands of the people where it always belonged.
Strong words by Mr. Cohen. Thank you, sir. Last but not least, closing statement by Mr. Cortez, please.
Thank you all for having us here. Nothing in this world, any policy or any group is perfect. I think there's always room for improvement, growth. And I believe with the light of everything that's going on, I strongly believe that it will. Will it lead to, board? Will not? I think is all a matter of the powers that be. Do I think there will be some changes to training? I believe that is what most of the chiefs are actually notifying across the country, that they're going to review the training, so it won't be the training from back 1952. I believe they're going to start. They should looking into more digitized monitoring, just street cameras and things of that nature to deter people from actually committing crimes. I mean, in some of the major cities they have them. So I mean, the changes will happen, but as far as the review board, I don't know if I will stand. I will agree with that, but I think there's other ways to make changes and be more open and transparent to the community that they serve, the police officers serve, because not all cops are bad, but those that are bad are ruining for everyone, and I believe that this is why we're here today, and these are why we are going through what we're going through right now in our time now.
All right. Well, hey, we want to thank my good brother Luis Cortez. We want to thank the good brother Spike Cohen. We want to thank the good brother Minister Gary McCullum. Gentlemen, your work is really going to help change the things that need to change. So thank you for participating. I want to say thank you again to Esmel and to Conrad, who both work tirelessly with the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. Their work is definitely going to help change the community. And there's some other things that can help change the community. And I want to end with doing that. I live in the city of Virginia Beach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to the city council page, and right here, it allows me to email all the members of city council, at one time. So we need to let our voices be known. So if you're in support of the citizen review panels with investigatory and subpoena powers, or if you're not, the city council needs to hear from you. In Virginia Beach, they had a secret backdoor meeting. Half of them said, yeah, I'm okay with it. Let's go forward. The other half, actually the majority half, it was a 6-5 decision. They decided, nah, we're not interested in it. Well, they hadn't heard from the community. And so I'm encouraging you to click that link. Send a message to your members, to your representatives. Send a message to your members, your representatives. Let them know that you're interested in a citizen review panel. Or, if you're not, let them know you're not. But share your input, share your thoughts with your representative. Michael Berlucci is one of my representatives. I live in the area that he represents. He needs to know how I feel. So he's going to get my email, because he's the one that voted against it. So I want to make sure that my city representatives know how I feel, and we want you to do the very same thing. So on behalf of the Hampton Roads Black Caucus, my good partner Conrad, my good partner Esmel Meeks, we thank you for participating. Hopefully you're going to take action, because it's not enough just to talk about it. You got to be about it. We have to be about it. Bout it, as they say. So thanks again for watching. You guys have a safe night. Let's make our communities more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited them. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.